One day, as the end of the year was approaching, I received a panicked call from my son's stepdaughter, Aurora, urging me to come to their house immediately. I drove to my son's house, a place I hadn't visited for a while. Just then, "Grace? Grandma!" My granddaughter Grace, sitting on the concrete steps of the entrance, was hugging her knees, looking cold in her school tracksuit. "What's going on? Why are you out here in such light clothing? And where are your mom and dad?" "They went on an overseas trip with my sister." "What? Anyway, get in the car. You're freezing." In a rush, I got Grace in the car and bought her a warm drink at the first grocery store I saw. Later, when I met with Aurora at my house, I was infuriated by what my son and his wife had done. These children relied on me, so I felt a sense of duty to help them. "Aurora, do you have the keys to their house?" "Yes." "Then let's go now. And just take what's important." "What are we going to do, Grandma?" I smiled. "We don't need that house anymore, do we?" My name is Arya, 64 years old. I lost my husband 2 years ago and now live alone. Still, my days are fairly busy, because I'm wrapped up in managing what my husband had left behind. When I married 40 years ago, my in-laws were what you might call an old family in the countryside. I never imagined I'd end up managing this large house. My family home was within a train ride to the city center. Yes, my husband was my college classmate. We got married right after graduation. I moved to this unfamiliar countryside, relying solely on him. I was surprised to see my husband, who until then had been a mere student like myself, suddenly being treated as the son and heir of a prominent local family. Karen, my mother-in-law at the time, thoroughly instilled in me the importance of treating one's husband with due respect. Her words were the law in this area, and although it was frustrating, I understood and complied. Thanks to that, even now, with no one left, I'm still treated with a certain respect as the manager of this house and land. I got married at a time when ordinary people were yearning to move out to the city center. Back then, I was seen as an oddity for coming all the way to the countryside. Karen probably gave me strict training to quickly dispel such views from the locals. And then, we had a child soon after our marriage. It was a boy, and he was celebrated by the people around us as the heir, including Karen herself. However, after having our son, my health deteriorated, leading to a less intimate marital life. At the end of the day, he was our only child. How I've regretted that over the years. But now that my son is married and my in-laws and my husband are gone, I am the one who manages this house and land. I've been left with a substantial passive income, enough to comfortably maintain this spacious home and live freely. Of course, a certain level of knowledge and the utilization of skilled individuals are essential for its upkeep. Thanks to the foundation laid by Karen and my efforts to keep up with the papers even after college, I've managed to avoid falling prey to the deceit of relatives and associated parties who frequent the premises. There are times, even at this age, when I must learn new things, but that adds a sense of vibrancy to life. There was one reason why I needed to work hard and manage everything like this. My husband left all his assets to me in his will. Why? It was due to the nature of our son, Thomas. Under normal circumstances, the inheritance would have been equally divided between myself and Thomas. However, my husband chose not to do this. He had expressed his concerns several years before passing. "If I leave him half of this house now, it will go to ruins. I want you to see if Thomas can change for the better." I thought about those words as his last will and testament. Because Thomas had gotten married to his second wife. Thomas had been with his first wife, Victoria, for a little over 10 years. But he got married again just 6 months after Victoria had passed away from an illness. He married the woman he had been having an affair with. My husband, who had been out of shape, seemed astonished by what was really going on with his son, who had seemed to be doing so well. This only served to worsen his condition. Thomas was an adult and married. Up until then, I saw him as an heir with no particular problems. Yet, I confess, there might have been a tendency to overly indulge him as our only heir. It was not just me, but everyone in the family. He was academically competent, progressing from a reputable high school to college. Although he had the option of attending a college in the city, he chose to remain local. After graduation, he got a job at an acquaintance's company. And then he married a local girl. That's when Thomas expressed his desire to get his own home and live independently. We constructed a house on a piece of land we owned for the young couple. Thomas and his wife Victoria got along very well. However, after the birth of their daughter Grace, Victoria's health began to deteriorate. The doctors declared she couldn't have any more children. It reminded me of my own experiences, so I did what I could to help her. Her biological mother frequently visited her too. We also arranged for babysitters and housekeepers. For a time, Victoria's health seemed to get better. But about a decade later, she was diagnosed with cancer. Looking back, Victoria was an incredibly resilient woman. She probably felt guilty for the trouble her health issues caused shortly after their marriage. That's likely why she endured so much during this time. Unfortunately, by the time the cancer was discovered, it was already too late. With our granddaughter Grace clinging to her, Victoria passed away far too young. During this time, I felt sorrow for various reasons. The most significant reason was how much I thought of Victoria as my own daughter. I also dearly loved my granddaughter, Grace. It pained me that she lost her mother. But there was another major issue weighing heavily on my heart. While Victoria was receiving medical treatment every weekend, Thomas already had a mistress. Perhaps that's why he hardly ever visited her. After Victoria's death, Thomas remarried in less than 6 months. His new wife, Olivia, was originally a woman from the club Thomas frequented. Surprisingly, by that time, they had already been in a relationship for over 5 years. Victoria's diary, which she left behind for me, was filled with detailed accounts of the days Thomas stopped coming home. Maybe she intended to use it as evidence for a divorce one day. We'll never know now. The new wife, Olivia, was 2 years older than Thomas. She moved into the house we had built without hesitation with her daughter, Aurora, who was 6 years older than Grace. Of course, I was opposed to this marriage. Thomas had been unfaithful to Victoria and had an affair with a woman in the nightlife business for a long time. He rarely bothered to visit his sick wife, and he even remarried soon after she was gone. I never imagined my son could be so heartless. But Thomas said, "I married the woman you set me up with, Mom. Haven't I fulfilled my duty?" Besides, Victoria wasn't perfect either. She fell ill before bearing a male heir. What was the point of marrying her? I couldn't even enjoy a good marital life with her. I had to get out and blow off steam, or else it would have affected my work. I had always known Thomas was cold towards Victoria. But this was beyond cruel. I blamed myself, wondering where it all went wrong with Thomas. Had we spoiled him too much, being our only son? Certainly, both my husband and I had done so. And the people surrounding us had pampered him as the only son of a prestigious family. But still, we had taught him right from wrong when he was young. With these thoughts, I had stayed away from my son's household for a while. It was also because of how busy I was following my husband's death. They would only visit at Christmas. But that was a mistake. It happened one day towards the end of the year. The temperature fluctuated wildly even into December, with days warm enough to make you sweat after only moving around a little, followed by sudden freezing winds. It was not easy for an aging person like myself. Nevertheless, it was the end of the year. While I was in the middle of dealing with reports from various sources, my private mobile phone suddenly rang. Who could it be? It was an unfamiliar number. But it was my private phone. Not many people knew this number. I decided to answer. "Excuse me, are you Grace's grandmother?" It was a young woman's voice. "Grace's, yes, I am. And you are?" "I'm sorry for the sudden call. I'm Aurora." It was Olivia's daughter. Why was she contacting me? "I don't have much time, So let me just say this. Could you please come to our house right away? Where was she calling from? The background noise was quite loud. Excuse me? What's going on? I understand it's hard to earn your trust, seeing as I'm the one calling you. But there's no time. I'll explain later. I'm sorry. With that, Aurora ended the call. It felt like I was being skillfully manipulated, but fortunately, I had a bit of time to spare. As I hurried outside to get my car, a cold, dry breeze brushed against my cheeks. I suddenly remembered that today was colder than yesterday. I drove to my son's house, a place I hadn't visited for some time, and parked in the driveway. It had enough room for 4 cars, but there were only 2. Were Thomas and the others there? With that thought, I got out of the car and headed towards the entrance. Just then, Grace? Grandma! I rushed over to her. Grace was sitting on the concrete steps of the entrance, hugging her knees and looking cold in her school tracksuit. What's going on? Why are you out here in such light clothing? And where are your mom and dad? They went on an overseas trip with my sister. What? I felt something was off when I heard those words. Anyway, get in the car. You're freezing. In a rush, I got Grace into the car and bought her a warm drink from the first grocery store I saw. She must have been really cold. She carefully warmed her hands before slowly opening the lid and taking a sip. I wanted to ask her immediately what had happened, but decided it was more important to drive safely back home. Once home, I took Grace to the living room. I called the housekeeper on the way and asked for 2 warm cups of tea and some snacks. The moment we entered the room and Grace felt the warmth, she looked relieved, and that gave me a really bad feeling. Feeling better? Yeah. Her response and her whole demeanor seemed younger than I remembered. She should be a growing girl at the age of 14. Even when she cried by her mother's sickbed, her wrists seemed to have more flesh on them. Wrists, hands? Grace, what happened here? Upon closer inspection, Grace's hands had severe chapping. I remember kids sometimes had that when I was young, but it's not something you see often nowadays. Oh, this started last year. It looks painful. Are you using any cream? No. I don't have any cream. I think it's from using hot water for bathing, washing dishes, and laundry. What? No housekeeper lately? Dad made her leave. Said it costs too much, so he told me to take on her job. What about your mom? Olivia? She's busy with lots of stuff, and Dad doesn't like it if her hands get rough. And your stepsister? My sister is. I stopped her. Did they tell you to call her that? Grace nodded silently. Dad told me to call her that when we're outside. At home, I call her Aurora. I prefer that too. All right, then let's go with that. Okay. And Grandma, that person isn't my mom. She told me to call her Olivia. I don't want to, but if I don't, she hits me. Grace said with a bitter smile. What does that mean? What had been going on in that household while I had been staying away? Eventually, after eating about half of the cake brought to her, Grace suddenly seemed to remember something. She reached into the pocket of her tracksuit and pulled out a mobile phone. It looked like the kind a grade schooler would have. Grace used it and began typing a message. What are you doing? Aurora told me to message her when you arrived, Grandma. She did. Yes. Aurora bought me this phone. Really? What about your previous one? Dad took it away not long after he remarried. That person told him it was too early for me to have one. That person. She must be referring to Olivia. Didn't your dad say anything? Grace shrugged her shoulders and frowned. Dad doesn't know anything about me. I couldn't get in touch with my friends for a while, so Aurora bought me this phone, saying she's sorry it's not the latest model. She also told me to make sure she'll never find it. Make sure she'll never find it. Who is she? It's Olivia, who had taken away the previous phone. Oh, Grandma. Aurora messaged back. She's on her way here from the airport. Really? Wasn't she supposed to be on a trip abroad? She said she'd pretend to go and come back, so she told me to wait. She said she'd slip away somehow. What exactly was going on between these two? At that moment, all I could do was wait. Aurora arrived at our house 3 hours later, after taking multiple buses. It's a provincial city, after all. Even if she came straight from the nearest airport, it would take a considerable amount of time. I'm sorry, Arya. Thank you for picking up Grace after such a short and sudden call. Aurora apologized deeply. Aurora. Her tone was clear and firm. Her gaze was unwavering. I thought to myself that although this girl looked flashy like Olivia, she seemed well-grounded. So what's with those two? Going on a trip abroad? They had been talking about going with the three of us for a while. But I wasn't sure what would happen there, so I pretended to get sick to get away. They planned to spend 3 weeks abroad, going all the way from Italy to the UK. 3 weeks? What about their jobs? This story seemed even darker than I had anticipated. And it seems like my mother was planning to hand me over to that man during this trip. What do you mean? Exactly what I said just now. That man had his eyes on both my mother and I from the beginning. Oh, my goodness. Hey, it's true, Grandma. Grace interjected, clenching her fist and sitting next to Aurora. I saw Dad insisting Aurora join him when I was done cleaning the bath many times. She always managed to brush it off as a harsh joke, but Dad would click his tongue and yell at me to go away when I was wandering around nearby. No, it's because of Grace that it didn't get any worse than that. I was always worried that Grace would get hurt. But I can't imagine what would have happened if she wasn't there. What on earth was going on? My son. How far has he corrupted? I pondered for a moment in front of the two girls. The way they protected each other. It seemed that they got along well. No, it was more than that. They were like comrades against a common enemy. So, how do you get by? Grace, you said earlier that Olivia told you to call her by her name, right? Yes. My mother started dating him for the money and even stayed with him through marriage. I've seen that man coming over to our house since high school. I've noticed the way he gradually started looking at me inappropriately. And now, because we live in the same house, he's getting cocky. Oh, how I hate it. Aurora said this while hugging herself, clearly disgusted. But I'm grateful for being allowed to continue my studies. I've been going to college and working part-time, trying to stay away from home as much as possible. Though, I thought about moving out. Aurora stayed because of me. Grace interjected. Even today. Those two left me alone without giving me a key or any money, telling me to go somewhere. And in that tracksuit. The wind would make her feel even colder. The sight of her waiting there, hugging her knees. I waited because Aurora told me to. Until those two boarded the plane and it was clear they weren't coming back. So, that's why you called? Yes. I was right by their side until just before their boarding time. But if I had left Grace alone, she would have caught a cold. So I made a call when they weren't looking. I knew she was still cold, though. I'm sorry. Honestly, they could have contacted me earlier, but I guess these young girls wanted to make sure those two were definitely abroad before reaching out. And now that they're relying on me, I must do what I can for these girls. Aurora, do you have the keys? To their house? Yes. Then let's go now. And just take what's important. What are we going to do, Grandma? I smiled. We don't need that house anymore, do we? And then, we were 3 weeks into the new year. The new year had begun and people started going back to school and work. Just then, 2 people came storming into my house, dragging suitcases. "Mom! What was that all about?" Thomas yelled at me right away. Apparently, he had gone back home without giving any thought. And then he saw it. There was nothing left there. Well, that was my property. I thought it was useless, so I had it demolished and the land sold. "Oh, your belongings are in this storage room." Right after that incident, I had contacted a real estate agent and a demolition company I knew well. When they learned of the situation, they immediately took me up on my offer. I tossed the keys to the storage room at Thomas. The 2 of them missed, and a small clang echoed in the entrance. "Don't mess with me, Mom! That was my house!" "Oh, why would you think that?" "Huh? What do you mean?" "Thomas, you seem to be mistaken. That house was built for you, but it was registered under me and my husband. And now, it's mine. What does it matter what I do with it? What about my daughters? What did you do with them?" "Your daughters? You're one to talk, Olivia." I sneered. Then, "Please, come in." I gestured for the 2 to come inside. "What? Not the living room?" I led them silently. Our destination was the spacious hall in the back. "Thank you for waiting." I opened the door after walking down the central corridor. There were a dozen or so people waiting in the room. But the first people that caught the eyes of the 2 behind me were Grace, Aurora. My granddaughters were sitting next to the chair I was about to take. "Aurora, why did you ignore my calls?" "Grace, you ratted us out to Mom. When did you become so cunning?" Thomas and Olivia, perhaps in a fit of anger, with red faces, tried to approach the girls, but they were restrained by the people in the room and forced to sit opposite us. Still looking at us breathlessly, they didn't seem to notice the people around us. "Now that everyone is here, let's begin." I looked around at everyone and spoke. "Let's proceed, everyone. Thank you for your cooperation. Shall we begin with you?" "Thank you." "Hey Thomas, tough break coming back from your long vacation. But there's no going forward from here." At that voice, Thomas was startled and turned to his left. "Sir!" The managing director spoke in a calm voice, but his eyes weren't smiling. "I never thought you'd actually apply for a 3-week vacation. I hoped you'd quit such bad habits by now." Thomas shrank under the low, commanding voice. He's always been arrogant towards his inferiors, but weak to those above him. He's been like that since childhood. "But until now, you have approved." "Look, Thomas. What do you think your value is?" "What?" "If you don't know, let me tell you. Your only value to our company is your status as the heir to this prestigious family." Thomas gritted his teeth. "But it seems that doesn't mean anything anymore." "What do you mean?" The managing director then turned to me. "Thomas." I looked straight at my son. His gaze visibly faltered. "I was going to announce to everyone here today the contents of the will I wrote the other day in the presence of your lawyers." "A will?" "Yes, I had to write it in advance, right? Otherwise, my inheritance would go to you, wouldn't it?" "Mom?" "I've already stored it in a safe place. It's simple. In the event of my passing, all of my inheritance will go to Grace." Thomas's jaw dropped in shock. Then, after a few seconds, "No, I must have heard something strange. It's odd, maybe my ears haven't adjusted from the flight?" "No. Arya hasn't said anything strange." Our family lawyer interjected. "The previous head of the family excluded Thomas as the heir because of his behavior and spending at that time." I remember Arya's words well. "Yes, I remember that time." "Only now you remember?" I shook my head in disbelief. Then the company's managing director took over the conversation, picking up where the lawyer and I left off. "It seems Arya has decided to completely strip you of your inheritance rights. That means there's no reason for us to treat you specially anymore." "But how can?" What mattered to our company was the connection with this region's large landowning family, not your personal capabilities. Now, what to do next? The managing director looked at me. I nodded slightly. Please proceed as you see fit. Thank you. Thomas, the entire company knows you applied for a 3-week vacation for a mere trip. The higher-ups are planning your demotion and reassignment. Be grateful that's all you're going to get. Thomas collapsed on the spot as if all his strength had left him. That's ridiculous. At that moment, Olivia leaned forward. Arya, if Grace is the heir, what about Aurora? Is Aurora different? Aurora? Why would you think that? She's
As the morning dew kisses the earth gently, I rise with the sun, feeling free, feeling plenty. In the quietude of dawn, where dreams unfold, I find solace in rhythm and stories untold. From the whispers of trees to the songs of birds, I draw inspiration from life's gentle words. In the symphony of nature, my spirit soars, a melody of hope behind closed doors. I lace up my shoes, hit the pavement light, each step a beat. In the rhythm of life, with every breath I rewrite my story in the stars, shining bright. In the stillness of the morning, I find my flow. In the silence of the sunrise, I let it all go. With every verse I let my heart show. In the gentle beginnings, my spirit will grow. In the hustle of the day, I find my stride. With every challenge I face, I take it in my stride. In the chaos of life, I seek to confide in the power of music where I can reside. From the city streets to the open sky, I spread my wings, ready to fly. In the rhythm of motion, I amplify my dreams, my hopes, reaching for the sky. I paint my world with words, colors bright. In the canvas of life, I find my light. With every rhyme, I ignite a fire within, burning bright. In the stillness of the morning, I find my flow. In the silence of the sunrise, I let it all go. With every verse I let my heart show. In the gentle beginnings, my spirit will grow. So here I stand, in the twilight's embrace, a storyteller in this vast space. With every word I speak, I trace my journey, my truth, leaving a trace. So as the sun sets and the day's at rest, I lay down my pen, feeling blessed. In the gentle beginnings, I confess my love for this art, ever impressed.
Thomas's child too, isn't she? Isn't Aurora sitting next to Arya for that reason? Stop the unsightly act, mother. Aurora sharply cut in. Unsightly? I'm not related to this family by a single drop of blood. How could a complete stranger claim any rights here? Are you stupid? How dare you speak to your mother that way? I've been leaving messages asking when you'd rejoin our trip, and you didn't reply at all. That's right. We'd been looking forward to it. Thomas even chimed in. Looking forward to it. Aurora took out her mobile phone. Excuse me, everyone. Could you listen to this for a moment? The room buzzed with curiosity. Come on, Aurora, won't you join me in the bath today? I'm sorry, I have a part-time job now. What? Can't you just do as I say? A dull thump, probably the sound of Thomas slapping the washing machine. Stop it, Dad. Aurora doesn't like it. Shut up. There was a noise along with Grace's voice. Grace! Aurora, you have a part-time job, right? Go, hurry. Thank you. There were some footsteps, then more sounds in the background. Ah, so what the two told me was just a fraction of the whole story.
What's this? That's Thomas's voice, isn't it?
Everyone in the room looked at Aurora, Grace, and Thomas in turn with somber expressions. Aurora stopped the recording and stated firmly,
"This is just part of it. I constantly felt danger like this. And Grace, being forced to clean the bathrooms and toilets, helped me on such occasions. Not just this time. She always let me know when he was around. How could she do that?"
Grace silently glared at Olivia, then took out her own mobile phone.
"What? I took your phone away."
Olivia, you just said you took it away? I posed the question.
In this day and age, even elementary school kids need mobile phones, and you took one from Grace, a middle schooler?
Mom, it's part of her education, right?
That's right. She doesn't need the latest model. Then at least give her a phone with basic functions. Nowadays, even going out with friends seems to require exchanging messages, and you get news from school too, right? Do you two even pay attention to notices from her school? Huh? I'm busy, you know. Do I look like I have time to attend her school events? What keeps you so busy?
Aurora chuckled.
What's that, Aurora? Mocking your parent like that.
Well, your busy has always been about deceiving men, hasn't it?
What?
Thomas's gaze turned towards Olivia.
Sorry to keep you waiting. John, please come in.
Aurora called out loudly. The door opened, revealing a man slightly younger than Thomas and his wife, and another man in a suit.
What?
Olivia's expression changed drastically.
It's been a while, Olivia. I never thought you'd end up in such a place. After all, you cost me everything. What are you doing here?
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce John. He's one of the victims this woman swindled money from in the past. Oh, Aurora. You said one, do you mean there are more? I asked Aurora. Yes.
This woman always had men coming and going, but John was the most tragic case, even though he was the most decent among them.
Since you're here, please tell us everything about this woman.
I see. John, what did Olivia do to you? Marriage fraud and theft.
The room buzzed at those words.
What are you talking about? You gave me that money voluntarily. I was under the impression that we were going to open a store together as a family, that's why I agreed.
John glared at Olivia, his gaze filled with contempt.
We needed some cash for a deposit on a nice property we had found back then, so I withdrew all my savings and handed the cash to this woman. But the very next day, she disappeared. Is there any proof?
Aurora operated her phone and played another audio clip.
Come on, let's go. What's this all of a sudden? We've earned plenty of cash from John, so, you know, we need to move to another town quickly.
Olivia slammed her hand on the table.
How did you even get that? course I did. I was always preparing to drag you down to hell. How dare you say such things to your mother? Huh? I can no longer consider you as my mother. You beat me up and skipped my meals just because you thought some guy you'd been dating flirted with me. And this trip, you were planning to set me up with your husband, right? I gave birth to you. I have the right to do whatever I want. Sure, it seems the term child abuse doesn't exist in your world.
At that moment, the man behind John stood up. So, you have more hidden crimes, it seems. The man pulled out a police badge. Olivia leaped back in shock upon seeing it.
Why are the police here? You really are clueless. John is suing you for fraud and theft. Isn't that right?
Yes. Aurora found me and set up this meeting. Olivia, you should give up now.
I can testify in any amount of detail of the fraud, theft, and child abuse against me. There are things that you did to me that I can't talk about here.
I heard Grace swallow nervously. So that's why Aurora wanted to protect Grace from experiencing what she did.
I'll testify about everything that happened to me, no matter how small. It's disgusting to even recall, but if it puts you behind bars, it's worth it.
What a strong girl. My son grew up to be an awful man, and he fell for a terrible woman, but I'm glad I got to meet Aurora. After that, the two got divorced. It sounds silly, but it was really when the money ran out that the relationship ended. When Thomas visited Olivia at the police station, they just hurled insults at each other. Yes, Olivia's deeds gradually came to light with the audio data and photos Aurora had been collecting, and more crimes surfaced. The child abuse Aurora suffered was as horrid as the police suspected, so they told me after their interviews. Hearing that, I resolved to do anything I could for Aurora. But she insisted she just needed help finding a job after graduation. So, I decided to arrange an excellent job for her. Thomas was demoted and transferred at once, as the managing director had said. To a regional branch, no less. On top of that, he became a section manager. It seems it was too difficult to demote him from a head of department to a regular employee. So, they placed him where he could do the least harm. In a region he had never been. In the end, it was this land of ours which we had protected that ruined my son. As a mother, all I can hope for is that he becomes somewhat decent in the outside world. Not that I expect much. As for us, the sound of children every day is such a joy. Now, this spacious house is home to me, my granddaughter, and her stepsister. The job I arranged for Aurora is to work alongside Grace, who will eventually inherit this house, serving as her assistant. This way, there is no dependency.
If Arya says it's necessary, I'll acquire any qualifications needed.
With such a strong girl by her side, I'm confident that Grace's future is secure. However, no matter how resilient Aurora is, there might be times when the past abuse haunts her. For the time being, I'll support these two. I need to remain in good health in order to do so. Thomas became the black sheep of this family because I was reluctant to abandon my own son. And there was also that parasitic woman. From now on, I want these girls, who worked so hard to eliminate them, to enjoy the life that they deserve for their age.